In this video and the next one, we will discuss the concepts related to domain classes, and we will discuss two techniques to identify domain classes that defines the data for the new system. Defining functional requirements is a critical part of core process 3. The analysis activities of core process 3 enables developers to discover and understand the details of the functional requirements. In the previous videos, we've learned how to identify use cases. Remember that a use case describes the dynamic behavior of the new system. And by dynamic behavior, we mean the functions and the methods of the new system. In this video, we will learn how to identify domain classes. Often, this is referred to as the static portion of the new system. Domain classes eventually becomes the object-oriented programming classes and the database tables. Domain classes define the data portion of the new system. So, what is a domain class? Sometimes we call it as a problem domain class. Problem refers to the business need or the business problem. It's also sometimes called an object class because it is a part of the definition for the object-oriented design. The class defines the properties of the set of objects. UML refers to the classes refers to classes as object classes. Entity relationship modeling, which you may have learned in a database course, calls them entities. In essence, class represents something that the user works with and the system must remember. To start our discussion, we will just refer to them as things. There are two primary techniques that are used to identify the classes. The first technique is called the brainstorming technique. It works well for experienced developers, especially developers that are also domain experts. And by domain experts, we mean someone who's very familiar with the business operations for a particular type of a system. The second technique is called the noun technique. This technique is a more of a systematic approach to make a list of all possible classes, and then we find a list of those that are actually important. We will discuss each technique. The brainstorming technique is best with users and developers working together. Here are the steps here. First, find the users who are experts in this problem area. Start with a set of use cases for that user role. Note, since this technique depends on the use cases, it's a good approach to define the classes at the same time that the use cases are being discussed. So even though we teach use case definitions and domain class definitions as two separate activities, in most cases, they are done together. Second, as you discuss the use cases, also identify what information is required for that use case. Determine what information is available, what is entered into the system, and what information is returned by the system. Third, one good approach is to think about all the different types or categories of information. We will discuss this further in the next slide. Fourth, continue to work with all types of users and stakeholders to expand the list. And finally, merge the list until you compile an initial list of classes. This slide contains very, very good information about the types of things to consider. This provides a powerful checklist of potential classes. Let's briefly discuss them. Before we start, we emphasize that we don't just want to identify all things, only those things that the system needs to remember that are important. We have tangible things, things that we can touch, like a book or a vehicle, document, or worksheet. So each one of those tangible things becomes a class. Roles for employees. So we can define a class or create a class or a table for an employee, for a customer, for a doctor, for a patient. These are roles. Okay, because we're gonna always have a new doctor, a new patient, a new end user. So we define a class for each one of those roles. Organizational unit, like task force, section, devices, sensor, timers, controllers. Each one of those devices also becomes a class. A site or a location, like a bank branch office. We have multiple branches for that bank or for that warehouse. We go ahead, and so the system must remember, so we go ahead and create classes for each one of those branches. Incidents or events or interactions, things like that, although we don't really touch those, but they still eventually becomes a class. Because for a flight, we need to remember, for example, departure time, arrival time. So there's some properties or some characteristics that we're going to discuss later the system must remember for each flight. The same goes for each service call, the time that we log that call, what kind of transactions or interaction with the customer that took place. So we need to record all that. Payments, orders, contracts, things like that. Thanks for watching.